Shifting focus now to the other war, the one in Ukraine. For long now, one question has haunted NATO leaders. Will the Russian President Vladimir Putin press the nuclear button? And for long, Moscow has denied it has any such intention. However, today, that possibility is looking more tangible than ever. The Russian president has ordered nuclear drills to be conducted right on Ukraine's doorstep. That's right. On Monday, Russia announced drills including practice for the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Now, what are tactical nuclear weapons? They are weapons to be used on the battlefield to achieve a military goal. They can be mounted on missiles, airdropped bombs, or even artillery shells. And here's why Russia's announcement of nuclear weapons drills is big. Major nuclear powers routinely check their nuclear weapons, but very rarely link such exercises to specific perceived threats in the way that Russia has, at least publicly. So what triggered this reaction from Russia? Moscow blames it on the West. No surprises there. Except NATO leaders have recently expressed their intent to deploy troops to Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine is not part of the US-led bloc. It wants to join the alliance. In fact, it was this interest that also triggered the Russia-Ukraine tensions in the first place. But placing NATO soldiers in Ukraine to fight Russia, that was never going to be on the cards. For starters, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. The US-led military alliance can go to war when one of them is attacked first. It is its policy. An attack on one is an attack on all. Hence, as it stands right now, NATO has no reason to attack or go to war with Russia. Moreover, direct confrontation with Russia is not what the NATO wants. A direct war with Russia would trigger World War III, and that is not what NATO would want or can afford. Still, it has not stopped some of them from discussing the Western response to the Ukraine war. Take the example of the French President Emmanuel Macron. In an interview with The Economist magazine, Macron did not rule out sending troops to Ukraine to confront Russia. A day later, the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron also declared that Ukraine could use British weapons against targets inside Russia if it wanted. Now, these provocative statements from the West have seemingly angered Vladimir Putin, provoking him enough to flaunt Russia's nuclear arsenal in the drills that have been ordered. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the nuclear weapons drill will include practice for the preparation and deployment of non-strategic nuclear weapons, weapons intended to increase readiness to fulfill combat tasks. And here's why the NATO should not take Russia's warning lightly. Russia's strategic nuclear forces hold exercises regularly, but the new drills involving tactical nuclear weapons mark a significant escalation in the conflict. Since the war started, Russia has warned of rising nuclear risks. In March, in fact, Putin warned the West that a direct conflict between Russia and the US-led NATO would mean the planet was one step away from World War III. He also said that hardly anyone wanted such a scenario. Still, shouldn't NATO leaders exercise restraint in provoking Russia? In the 2 years of the war, we've already come a long way from verbal nuclear threats to Russia now holding nuclear drills. Who is going to stop before the next step becomes a reality? Sure, Russia follows a no-first-use policy, indicating it would retaliate to any nuclear or mass destruction attack against it. Still, amid the escalating provocations, could the Ukraine war turn nuclear? We do hope that sense prevails. is Rafa. It is in the south of the Gaza Strip. To its north is Khan Yunis. To its south is Egypt. The North Sinai Governorate, if I must be more specific. Rafa shares a border with Egypt. Rafa is also the only city in Gaza that the Israeli military has not entered. This may change any moment now. All signs are pointing at an imminent and immediate invasion of Rafa. Number one, Israel has started air raids in eastern Rafa. Number two, Egypt has raised the military level of preparedness in northern Sinai. Egypt, in fact, has built a fortified buffer zone near its border with Rafa. The third sign is the collapse of the ceasefire talks. Now, these talks were held in Cairo over the weekend. Hamas sent a delegation. Israel skipped. Hamas demanded an end to the war. It said Israeli hostages held in Gaza will be freed if the war ends. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outrightly denied. Let me quote what Bibi said. We are not prepared to accept a situation in which the Hamas brigades come out of their bunkers, take control of Gaza again, rebuild their military infrastructure, and return to threatening the citizens of Israel in the settlements surrounding the southern mountains in all parts of the country. What is it that Netanyahu is prepared for then? Is it the invasion of Rafah? And here's sign number 4, evacuation orders. That's right. The Israel military has told Palestinians living in eastern Rafah to evacuate immediately. People are reportedly being sent text messages. They are getting phone calls. Flyers are being dropped. Warnings are also being broadcast on television, all reading, evacuate immediately. The IDF says the order applies to around 100,000 people. The question is, where will these people go? Is there any safe zone in a war zone? In Gaza, at least, there are none. Al-Mawasi is where the IDF is asking the evacuees to take refuge in, but the UN aid agency says this place is not suitable. It does not even meet the basic needs. The Palestinians in Rafah are already living in dire conditions. Many of them have moved 4 to 5 times since the war started. Must they move all over again? And why does Netanyahu want to invade Rafah? At the start of the war, the Israeli Prime Minister had pledged to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. Israel is not close. IDF claims there are 4 Hamas battalions in Rafah. Where is the guarantee that an invasion of Rafah will mean the end of these battalions? Hamas has said that Rafah operation will not be picnic for the IDF, adding that its fighters, led by the Al-Qassam brigades, are ready to defend themselves. Next question. Whom does the Rafah invasion actually benefit? Who has a greater interest in the conflict now? Sure, Hamas provoked the war with its October 7 attacks. It launched an assault, killed 1190 Israelis, took hundreds of others hostage. But it is 6 months now. Nearly 35,000 people have died in Gaza, and they are mostly women and children. The war should have ended by now, and it has not, because peace does not favor Netanyahu's political interest. Bibi is facing pressure at home. And as per the latest survey by Israel Democracy Institute, only 15% of Israelis want Netanyahu to keep his job after the war. Only 15%. In other words, if Netanyahu is to keep his job, the war must go on. And this also explains why Netanyahu has been talking about invading Rafah for weeks now. He has previously also said that Rafah will be invaded regardless of whether Israel and Hamas reach a ceasefire deal. Now, what are the chances Netanyahu sabotaged the ceasefire talks and he will now use the failure of the talks as an excuse to invade Rafah? You see, Netanyahu is also facing pressure from the opposition. Opposition leaders like Yair Lapid criticized Bibi on the platform X. You know what Lapid said? Netanyahu must do everything to bring back the hostages. Hamas, for that matter, says it will continue the ceasefire talks. Hamas spokesperson Abdul Latif Al-Qanu said, and I'm quoting here, "We will continue the negotiations positively and with an open heart." What about Netanyahu? Today, Israel is marking Holocaust Remembrance Day. The sound of a 2-minute siren brought Israel to a standstill. In Jerusalem, Netanyahu attended the wreath-laying ceremony at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial. During that ceremony, Netanyahu said, and I'm quoting, "If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone." Does Israel have a choice? Even Israel's closest ally appears to have had enough. In a first, the United States has stopped a weapon shipment meant for Israel. This is a story Axios broke, that the Biden administration put a hold on a shipment of US-made ammunition that was meant for Israel. This happened last week. The question is, did Joe Biden cave in the face of student protests? Student protests that began in US campuses have jumped borders, by the way. Today, students in Bangladesh held an anti-Israel rally. Students in Oxford and Cambridge have also set up protest encampments. So did the Biden administration stop the arms shipment following pressure from campuses? Or did Netanyahu do the job with his lack of interest in peace? Last week, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Netanyahu that a major military invasion of Rafa would force the United States to publicly oppose Israel. What's more, it would negatively impact the relations between the US and Israel. Egyptian officials also have warned Israel that the invasion of Rafah could trigger a refugee crisis. It could force Palestinians to flock to the Sinai, and this would basically impact relations between Egypt and Israel. The European Union's top official, Josep Borrell, has called Israel's evacuation order unacceptable. Here's his post on the platform X. The French embassy in Israel, meanwhile, says that the French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken to Netanyahu. He has also reiterated his opposition to the Rafah offensive. And as I speak, there is utter chaos and confusion in Rafah. The situation is desperate. People in the thousands are taking the road. Palestinians say they do not know where to go. The international charity Islamic Relief has said that Palestinians will inevitably die as a result of the Rafah evacuation. The death toll in Gaza is nearing 35,000. Over 78,000 others have been injured.
The people are all dead. What do they want from us? What do they want from us? God is our suffice and the best disposer of our affairs.
The Israeli occupation told people to go to Rafah and that it is a safe area. Today they're telling us to get out of Rafah. Where will the people go? Where will all these crowds go? 1.5 million or 2 million civilians. Where will they go? Should they go to the sea?
Now, these are questions that Netanyahu should ideally be answering. Is there any safe zone in this war zone? But does Netanyahu even care? Is cancer the next big thing for pharma giants? Let me tell you about the Pfizer CEO's comments. His name is Albert Bourla, and according to reports, he has said now that the COVID-19 pandemic is over and global demand for its vaccines and coronavirus drugs is falling, Pfizer has its sights set on the cancer treatment market. He also added that the company expects to score big on blockbuster cancer drugs. You see, the COVID-19 pandemic brought about a business boom for Pfizer. Its revenue soared to record heights. In 2022 alone, Pfizer's total sales amounted to $157 billion. COVID-19 vaccine accounted for close to $38 billion of that. Now, the pandemic is long over. The demand for COVID-19 related products has declined, and so has Pfizer's revenue. In the year 2023, sales were down by more than half to $71 billion. The company's shares also took a hit. They have fallen by 42% since the end of 2022. This led to a major cost-cutting campaign. Pfizer laid off hundreds of workers at its UK, US and Irish facilities. What will the American drug maker do now? What is its next big move? The answer is simple. It's going big on cancer treatment because, according to Pfizer, cancer is the next big thing after COVID-19. Speaking to the media, he said, and I'm quoting, "Oncology, it is our new COVID. We did what we did with COVID. We are very proud to have saved the world, but it is behind us now. We want to do it once more, and I think oncology is our best chance to do it." You see, after a rocky year, Pfizer is ready to move on from COVID, betting on cancer drugs to help it regain its footing. In fact, it fully integrated with cancer drug maker Seagen last year. And this has doubled Pfizer's oncology drug pipeline to 60 different experimental programs. With Seagen under its belt, Pfizer says it could produce at least 8 blockbuster medicines by 2030. It is going to focus on 4 most common cancers. This includes breast cancer, genitourinary, as in urinary and genital cancers, thoracic, which refers to lung, head and neck cancer, and hematology oncology, meaning cancers of the blood. You see, Pfizer has its strategy straight, and it might just work out in its favor. After all, cancer is a leading cause of death worldwide. It accounted for nearly 10 million deaths in 2020. That is nearly 1 in 6 deaths. The cancers that Pfizer is targeting are the most common types in the world. In 2020, according to the World Health Organization, there were 2.26 million cases of breast cancer, 2.21 million cases of lung cancer, 1.93 million cases of colon and rectum cancer, and 1.41 million cases of prostate cancer. Like I told you, Pfizer is aiming to produce treatment drugs for all of these cancers. Will it succeed? It did become a household name after the pandemic. It already has a handful of breast cancer drugs in development, and some of them are in trial stages. How long before they are launched? And if Pfizer is doing this and publicly owning up to it, the rest of the big pharma is bound to follow suit. The one good thing that may come out of it is we will get a cure for cancer. But at what price? Only the drug makers will decide.